So what I really wanted to talk about isn't really technology, but there is some technology aspects to it. So I've been at HiQ for 10 years. Prior to that, I was 10 years at CMS doing technology and IT stuff. And really, one of the things that I've seen over the last sort of 5 years particularly, but even more so in the last 2 years, is a couple of key trends around the use of technology and how technology is impacting and changing the way particularly law firms, but professional services firms are approaching business. And I think of technology as one of 5 things. So I always talk about technology in the context and in the surroundings of culture, process, the client themselves, and data. And all 5 of those things play a really key part in strategy, in operationalizing elements of your business. But actually, a lot of time, people just start to think about the technology itself, and technology sort of becomes the silver bullet almost, and you forget about the other aspects. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the other aspects of the world that influences technology adoption. So the first one of those is actually how multidisciplinary teams come together and can come together to provide a tremendous amount of value. So in the context of providing a client a solution, a technology solution, whatever it might be, how do you bring together the right team at the right time and within the right context? Oftentimes, I've seen examples of bringing in marketing when marketing's needed, and bringing in finance when finance is needed, and various other sort of component parts, the lawyers, the partners, and everything else. And actually, what I've seen in the last couple of years is teams with a sort of a grounding and an initiative and a focus come together on day one almost. And so it's almost like a matrix effect of you've got marketing in the room, you've got a partner in the room, you've got some lawyers, paralegals, whatever that might be. You've got technology, you've got marketing, as I said, finance, and you're bringing them in to actually start talking about how you can sort of deliver something at the beginning. And that is winning through. That is really shining through in terms of how the outcomes and those solutions are being brought together. Now, the technology is part of the delivery mechanism. Technology these days is a bit of a commodity in that sense, but it's how you stitch everything together that is really key. And so thinking about specialist roles and complementary skills and how they come together, really high levels of collaboration and innovation and ideation, thinking about sort of building out services that don't look like Windows 98, because the technology is there. And actually, the technology these days, whether it be Microsoft, HiQ, or any other technology, Brighter, for example, you can still make it look terrible. You can still make the experience look awful, even though it's very functional. And I think there's a really big drive towards user experience and overarchingly the customer experience, which is the second sort of trend that I'm looking at the moment. And everyone talks about customer experience. And I've lived in a world where I've been responsible for a global team of customer success managers. So we spend a lot of time talking about adoption and supporting our customers and being almost like their confidants and their sort of supporting sort of players behind the scenes. But what does that mean if you can't sort of invoice a customer correctly? What does that mean if you can't do something else? You could provide the best technology, the best experience, but actually if you can't get all of the little bits stitched together in the right way, then you're still ultimately not providing an overarchingly good experience for the customer. And I see a lot of our law firm clients now taking a step back and sort of really starting to think about, okay, well, how is this customer engaging with the firm as in the big, and what does that mean, and how are we engaging with them, and what kind of reporting are we offering them, what kind of experiences are we looking at? And experiences are increasingly becoming digital experiences, so self-service elements of what you would normally have done sort of 10 years ago, whether it be logging in to find out the WIP or the invoices or anything else, but it would have been a phone call or it would have been a request in via email. And those sorts of things are changing the dynamic of the relationships and dynamic of the experiences. And I think the third thing to talk about really is how particularly our customers, probably over the last 4 or 5 years, and customers of technology solutions like HiQ are relying on the ecosystem. So perhaps HiQ can't do everything, but actually it can integrate with many different systems, as Richard will know because he does it all the time. But how do they come together? And then how do you create something that is sort of, how can you commoditize or productize your knowledge and your expertise? And a lot of time they become value add services for some of your high paying customers. But actually the opportunity to create revenue and competitive advantage is really rich. And sort of transposing what would have been an engagement with a lawyer and would have been high volume, actually, how can you replace that with technology? How can you replace that with some kind of environment that looks good, operates well, is accessible 24/7, regardless of geography? And how do you do that in a way that actually supports your revenue targets? How does it support you to create a competitive advantage over your competitors, obviously, but how does it make that client experience stickier? How can you bring people closer? How can you drive new revenue? And they're the three things that I'm seeing. So technology is a sort of a foundation for all of those things, but having a really sort of clever, smart collection of people with differing skills and specialist roles and increased collaboration, how they come together with the customer experience and productizing services and solutions. And I think technology is the foundation there, but all of these three are three things that I'm seeing many of our law firms, customers driving forward. Not necessarily just because of the pandemic, but there has been an increase because of the pandemic in terms of how they're operationalizing things. But